days, all of a sudden, 90 days after the Fed said, hey, all that money coming in, we want to know where it's coming from now. So when you transfer, and we want to make it maybe retroactive too. So what happened? All the foreigners that were bringing in all this corrupt money panicked, and they stopped buying, they canceled. 90 days. In New York, and Miami was one of the worst places for the speculation. So they're seeing that hit right away. But the Wall Street Journal blamed it on or referred it to because of the currency difference. The currency hasn't traded nothing in 90 days. No, the 90 days that people want to see their money, where the money's coming from. And New York is the second place that the Fed said they're going to start. So Miami and New York. And what happened? The New York luxury agents are saying, "Oh, what's going on here?" Well, yeah, nobody was buying your crap before because it was great to live in. 40% of the units in New York those high-end units are vacant. They're just a place to park their money. Now when you take away that place to park the money, what happens? Oh, there's no use for us anymore. So what happened? The average American couldn't afford homes now because they were placing parking money everywhere. And those are the two cities that they started with. So what happens when they start doing it in other states? That's why the Chinese money is going everywhere now. The same in the same issue, they're talking about how they're going to Milwaukee, the Bronx, all these other places they never went to before. Now they're just trying because they know it's the end game for China to hide this money. And the reason why that's going to accelerate, China's in a panic right now to get their money out. Everybody familiar with their demographics? Their demographics, the older generation is outnumbering the youth by a huge margin. You know why?
One child.
That's right. They had a one-child policy, and now they're trying to change it, but it's too late. They have imagine a triangle, right? So every single government is based off their social nets and stuff is based off a regular triangle. Well, the triangles are tipping over, right? In every country, not just China, in the U.S. too. Every country, every major country, the upside-down triangle is happening, and that's why they're panicking and printing so money. But China's even worse. So you have that, and the ghost cities. Everybody familiar with the ghost cities in China?
Yeah.
Well, so those investors invested in those ghost cities, right? They didn't know what was going on. They didn't know the government was going to fill them up. Then the other thing that they're in a huge panic. China's no longer. Now put yourself in those people's positions that have money, and they know this. They see this because it's the elite getting the money out. The average person in China is toast. They used to be self-sufficient just 5 years ago. China was self-sufficient. They grew their own food. They were able to feed their own population. Now they have to import food, the farmland the size of California. So it takes the land the size of California every year to feed China. They have to import that much food. That's why China's buying, what are they buying? Tons of farmland all over the world. Now they're buying the U.S. They bought a bunch of Brazil, but they're buying farmland in the U.S. They're buying water rights in California. They're buying water rights in Lake Michigan. And this is why they're in a panic to get their money out. The water, 60% of the water in China they can no longer use because it's been polluted because of all their manufacturing and stuff. So they don't have the water. Their farmland, almost 25% of it now, is too polluted with the chemicals. And then on the far west coast, where they have a lot of farmland, the desert is overtaking China because they didn't farm it right or whatever. So the dust, the sand is taking like a huge amount of farmland. And China's putting trees up to try and stop it, but it's not working. So that's taking up even more and more of their farmland. So that's why the elite are trying to get their money out. That's why they're affecting real estate markets. Not just like I said, the U.S., but also Australia. They're buying London. They're buying all this property because they're trying to get their money out. That's a huge impact. And now it's starting to hit the under 500,000 market and first-time home buyer market. They're starting to hit. To give you an idea of the impact that the Chinese investor is having on not just the U.S. but Australia. The U.S. is the only one that hasn't, that I know of, major city that hasn't passed a law to make them source it. But Australia has also halted new Chinese money from coming in because they are doing the same thing. The average Australian couldn't afford to buy a house because the Chinese were coming in and saving the money. Yeah, pushing them up. Because they're not using them to live in. And if on the front page of China Daily, they already have more millionaires by a great amount. Now they just passed the U.S. in billionaires. So the U.S. China has more billionaires than the U.S. now too. The Chinese economy isn't that old. It's only about 20 years old. The Chinese economy, today's economy really started in 1994. What they did is they keep on reducing their currency value to compete with the U.S. In fact, when we heard about the slowdown in China, the main reason why the slowdown was happening, because on even a field, it's happened a few times in the past 3 years, but the last time it happened was about 6 months ago. It was just as equal to produce, manufacture in the United States as it was in China. Because their energy in the United States is much more cost effective and cheaper than it is in China. And the American worker is 4 times more productive than the Chinese worker. And safety issues and quality issues. And then the final thing is the shipping. So when you add all that in, it was actual more cost effective to manufacture in here. And that's why you saw the slowdown, the big collapse in the Chinese stock market. And what did the Chinese government do to fix that and bring it back? They reduced the value of their currency. Like I think it was like 20%, just so they would be able to keep that advantage. So every time the U.S. gets a little bit close to them, they cut their currency. And then you see what they have just done recently is they've just dumped steel on the market. So you're going to see the steel industry in the U.S. take a big hit. Who knows? They probably won't survive this one because China is dumping cheap steel that is cheaper to. It's below the cost to make. They're dumping it in the U.S. right now as we speak in retaliation for companies not bringing it over. There was a retaliation act. And they also just charged a tariff on e-commerce from the U.S., like 15%. But the U.S. doesn't do anything about it. But this is the stuff that China's doing right now. And the ultimate goal for, what we're seeing the ultimate goal for China to do is they'll never overtake the dollar. That's impossible for China to do. They'll never overtake the dollar. But right now, the biggest advantage America has around the world, whether it's fighting a war or driving down the price, is the dollar, the currency. But what China's trying to do is bring down the dollar to where they have to start a whole new currency, because that's the only thing that they can do to put us on even playing field as far as the currency, because the Chinese currency can never go on par with the dollar because of their current economy and their demographics. So we'll switch gears a little bit to Japan. Everybody familiar with what Japan just did? And they have a huge problem too with their demographics. Japan and China are in a very similar situation, except China's just obviously a lot bigger. But Japan's the 3rd largest economy, and they just went into they have printed 1.2 quadrillion yen in the past 5 years. So I don't even know what quadrillion is. That's more than a trillion. But that's how much they printed. And one of the main reasons why is because their demographics. They're even in a worse situation than China because of their demographics. Their older generation is far outpacing the younger generation, and then you get the upside down triangle. And the reason why looking at Japan is so important right now is because Japan has done the exact same thing that the U.S. is trying to do with the printing of the money. It's just our economy is so much larger that it takes a longer time for it to react. And what's going on in China, or Japan, does everybody know what Japan just did? The 3rd largest economy in the world? Negative interest rates, that's right. That's unheard of. My background is in finance, and in school, 20 years ago, if we would have done a report that someone did negative interest rates, it would have thrown you out. Said, you're crazy, because negative interest rates. So, does everybody understand what negative interest rates are? That's right, they charge you money. So, right now in the U.S., we have negative real rates, because if you bring your money into the bank right now, it's like 0.75 or 0.8, right? So, inflation is more than 0.8, okay? So, you are getting negative return in the United States if you do that kind of investing. But they're not actual negative rates. In Japan and many parts of Europe now, it's actually negative rates. So if you bring in $1,000 in January 1st, 2016, on January 1st of 2017, it'll be $900. $950. Yeah, exactly. That's the point. They don't want you to put your money there. They want you out there. Here's the problem with negative rates. Okay, this is a little off topic, but we'll keep it real quick. Negative rates don't work in a cash society because at negative rates, just like you said, if you got money, why am I going to bring it into the bank? If I keep it at home, it's zero. They charge me nothing. That's right. So the only way negative rates work is in a digital currency. So that's going on right now. So if someone would have said negative rates just 10 years ago, they would have thought you were a whack job. And now it's happening in the third largest economy. So how many people think that the interest rates are going to go up in the U.S.? Okay, how many say yes?
What time frame?
Rado. How many think the interest rates are going to go up? Okay. How many think they're going to not go up? Okay, so it's like 50-50. Okay. Well, they can't go up. And we already have proof of that. That's why Janet Yellen's in a panic. And she didn't want to raise them in December. She didn't want to raise them in December, but they give this, if they didn't, they said that the economy was getting better and all these jobs are coming and blah, blah, blah. So she didn't raise them, and they really didn't go up. So she didn't raise the Fed, if she wanted to raise the Fed fund rate, so she raised it, whatever it was, a quarter point. Or was it 8? It doesn't really matter. Yeah, the rates didn't even go up. Mortgage rates are lower now than then, and they're lower now than they were a year ago, 2 years ago. The rates are still low. The rates aren't going nowhere because they know what's going to happen if they raise the rates. And they're supposed to raise them in March, right? And they're supposed to raise them in April now. They can't raise the rates, especially if these other countries lower. And here's what's got her so frightened is because of what Alan Greenspan started in '87. And this information is real important because you want to know this when people are asking you if the rates go up. I mean, we can all agree prices are going to go down, right? I mean, there's no possible way because the only way for the rates to go up and the prices not to go down is people's income have to go up, and people's incomes are down to 1995 levels. Okay? The only thing that has brought up prices is the artificially low rates and the cash investors and the cheap money coming in. So let's do a quick history lesson, and then you will know for sure what they're going to do with rates and what's going to happen. So in 1987, remember the stock market crash in 1987? Yeah. So that was like huge. I think it was 30 or 40% one day. Alan Greenspan came out and said, we'll provide as much liquidity as possible. They lowered the rates and got as much liquidity in there as possible, right? That was the beginning of the great debt cycle. And they just started borrowing, poured money at it, okay? That was Greenspan. And so that's what started the great debt cycle. And right now, we're in the final stages of it. We'll talk about it. We're in the very final stages of it, whether it's 1 year, 5 years, I don't think it's more than 5 years, but 1 to 5 years, because we're in the final stages right now of the debt cycle, and we're in the final stages of the super debt cycle that started in 2010. So that started in 1987. In 1998, people think that with the first bailout was a few years ago. No. The bailout started way long time ago. In 1998 was one of the largest bailouts. And if you add inflation, it's probably equivalent to one of the bailouts that they did for AIG and the other banks that they bailed out. What happened in 1998 is there was one of the largest hedge funds was called Long-Term Capital Management, and you remember that? And so what happened is Warren Buffett was going to buy these assets. Warren Buffett and his buddies were going to buy these assets for 20, 30 cents on the dollar, and make a huge profit by holding on to them. But what happened is if they would have done that, if that would have shown the true value of those assets at that time, and then it would have hurt the Goldman Sachs, it would have hurt the other banks, because then they would have had to, none of these assets are selling, right? So if we don't sell an asset, you don't know the true value of it, right? Just like homes, right? If you got a bunch of homes, the values can't go down because you're not selling them no matter what they're worth. Well, these assets were the same with this hedge fund. So if those assets were sold, then we would know the true value of those assets. And JP, that's when all the banks are still around, Bear Stearns, all them. That means when Warren Buffett went to buy those assets, if he bought them, then the other banks would have to mark down